The United States came out of the 20th century in a period of an economic boom. However, by 2008, the country was in the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. In 2008, the stock market plummeted, and Lehman Brothers, a financial services firm with more than a century and a half of history, went bankrupt. Unemployment rose, home ownership rates fell, along with the gross domestic product. President Bush responded by approving $700 billion in aid to bail out struggling banks and brokerage houses before they failed. The Great Recession emerged from problems that could be traced back several decades to the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act, which was a New Deal law that separated investment and commercial banking. This was separated during the Clinton administration. Complex financial structures, corruption, and high-risk endeavors put the economy in peril. In addition to the problems in the financial industry, consumers bought homes that were more expensive than they could afford, taking advantage of subprime mortgages. Subprime mortgages gave home loans to buyers with poor credit ratings or with low incomes, and often both. When the economy faltered, homeowners who had subprime loans faced foreclosure because they owed more on their home than the home was actually worth. Because the wealth gap was so firmly in place, the vast majority of Americans were unable to help lift the economy back up. Personal debt, a rising poverty rate, and an increasing divide between the wealthy and poverty in the United States contributed to this economic suffering. Now, just as with the Great Depression, the United States was not alone. The Great Recession reverberated across the world. Bankruptcy most notably threatened Spain and Greece, and Ireland and Great Britain and China also felt the effects of this recession. Now, here on this chart, you can see how the top 20% actually are controlling about 87% of the wealth, controlling the capital income in the United States. Now, what's important to keep in mind here is during the Depression, the number at the top was significantly smaller, only about 1% of the population, and they controlled about 75%. So with this recession, we do see more division in terms of socioeconomic class. However, we do still have a significant portion of the population in that second 20% and the bottom 20%, pretty much where they've always been. So we do have more wealthy people, however, or more wealthy people than we had during the Great Depression, but we still have a problem of income inequality and severe economic strain during this recession. Now, the 2008 campaign season began during the turndown of the economy. And so this really created an important moment in history for presidential candidates. In 2008, Republican John McCain and Democrat Barack Obama both competed for the White House. McCain was a longtime Arizona senator who chose Sarah Palin as his running mate. Barack Obama was an African-American junior senator from Illinois, and he selected Delaware Senator Joe Biden as his running mate. In spite of racial prejudices, fears that Obama was a Muslim, and accusations that he associated with terrorists, Obama generated grassroots support and used the internet for fundraising and offered optimism in the face of despair. Now, this is the first time that we see a president or a presidential candidate really sees on the internet as a way of reaching out to the people, to the masses. Franklin Delano Roosevelt attempted this with his fireside chats, but we really don't see the internet be seized as a medium until candidate Obama is on the scene. In the first 2 years, Obama continued most of the Bush bailouts and offered assistance to the automobile industry. He also passed an economic stimulus aid to local and state governments. In addition, Congress extended unemployment insurance, passed major health care reform, and repealed the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. Obama's administration faced opposition, particularly from the Tea Party movement, which accused the president of being a socialist and carrying out socialist policies intended to expand the size and control of the federal government. Though the stock market gained momentum, the effects of the economic improvements were not felt by the overwhelming majority of Americans. The unemployment dropped, but it was still above 8% by 2012, and job creation was minimal. The slow pace of improvement helped Republicans to win control of the House in 2010 in the midterm elections. The next year, in 2011, critics on the left of the president launched the Occupy Wall Street movement, which fought corporations' inequality and the government's inability to resolve the most pressing problems that were faced by ordinary Americans. In the midst of an ailing economy, and despite the attacks on his record by Republicans, nominee Mitt Romney, the president, sought and won re-election. He achieved this by holding together a coalition of African American, Latino, female, young, and lower income voters. The economy showed greater signs of improvement in Obama's second term. Unemployment dropped to the lowest figure in 7 years. The GDP grew steadily. While some improvements were made, real income declined during this time, and wealth inequality continued to grow. Many of the policies that were implemented during the presidency of Obama really only served to continue the discrepancy between the very wealthy and the extremely poor. Republicans won a majority in the Senate in 2014 and now controlled both the House and the Senate. They used this position to strike down many of Obama's legislative efforts, including proposals for immigration reform. Obama's Secretary of State was Hillary Clinton, the former First Lady. She guided the Obama administration in withdrawing troops from Iraq, enhancing operations in Afghanistan, and eventually moving operations into Pakistan, where Osama bin Laden was killed in 2011. From 2006 to 2013, North Korea was able to test a series of nuclear weapons. This caused great concern to many Americans. In 2011, the Middle East began to experience dramatic changes as young people took to the streets and freed themselves of despotic governments in places like Libya and Egypt, as well as Tanzania. Libya also saw the overthrow of their dictator, Muammar Gaddafi. Many changes in the Middle East did not last. Military rule returned quickly to Egypt, and a civil war continued to be waged in Libya and in Syria. There was also a rise in a new militant organization known as the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS. ISIS is an offshoot of al-Qaeda that used sectarian violence in the aftermath of Saddam Hussein's overthrow to gain new members and power in the Middle East. The Syrian civil war continues to have global ramification as millions of refugees flee the country. Tens of thousands of these refugees have sought refuge in Western Europe and the United States, but have been continually met with economic and political obstacles to relocation. The Obama administration sought to fight the war on terror by increasing the use of remote-controlled armed drones. While effectively eliminating the risk to American troops, the drone strikes resulted in the deaths of many civilians in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Yemen, and Somalia. The Patriot Act, which was first put in place during the George W. Bush administration, was renewed by President Obama. And the Patriot Act and the National Security Agency began to increase the amount of intelligence that was collected. The National Security Agency, using this Patriot Act guise or this Patriot Act policy, was able to begin collecting massive amounts of data on civilian cell phone use. So, if you have a cell phone, all of the things that you search, do, transactions you make, things that you click on, all of those things are generating data. And under the Patriot Act, any kind of data can be collected by the National Security Agency. Critical of domestic surveillance under the guise of anti-terrorism, intelligence analyst Edward Snowden leaked information to the media before fleeing the country. The public outcry that was triggered by Snowden's actions led Congress to curtail some of the nation's security practices. The biggest departures in foreign policy came in 2016, when the Obama administration normalized diplomatic relations with Cuba and negotiated an agreement with Iran to end its nuclear program. Not all of the administration's foreign policy relations were positive. Relations with Russia deteriorated greatly in Obama's second term. This, in part, was a result of Russia's annexation of Crimea and its support of a pro-Russian separatist government in the Ukraine. Globalization remains a prominent theme as China competes with the United States for economic supremacy while controlling a significant share of America's national debt. Globalization remains a prominent theme as China continues to grow and become a more powerful nation. Environmentalism issues remain a problem, with global warming and climate change threatening to jeopardize the ecosystem, create extreme weather events, and influence global economies. The debate over immigration remains at the forefront of many Americans' lives, as advocates to paths to citizenship compete with advocates who want to end illegal immigration. Americans have seen family demographics shift as well. Interracial marriages are on the rise, and an increase in efforts to expand marriage to same-sex couples has been revitalized.